Our reading from Joshua this week records the moment when Israel finally arrived at the Jordan River, which is the last border, the last barrier between wandering in the desert, as they'd done for 40 years, and the promised land. And there were questions to be asked as they entered the promised land. Questions like, who belongs to Israel and who belongs to God? And there was time to answer both of those questions, and the rest of the book of Joshua will ask those questions and answer them for us, but those at this moment were future problems for a future time. These were the kinds of questions that could be asked once they'd crossed in, once they'd moved from wilderness to home. But Joshua, here and now, as they stood on the edge, laid out the ground rules. He spoke as a prophet. He spoke in the name and in the words of God. And one thing stands out. If you read through the whole passage, as we did this morning, you'll notice that one phrase is repeated several times. Be strong and courageous. More than one sermon has been preached on those 4 words, be strong and courageous, and it makes sense. Why wouldn't you? That phrase is repeated at least 3 times inside of our reading and more times later. It was important enough to say more than once. I was listening to a lecture recently on this passage, on the whole book of Joshua, by an Anglican priest and professor of Old Testament named Lisa Ray Beale. And she was wise enough to point out that the sermons preached on this passage tend to be of one kind, of the stiff upper lip and pull up your bootstraps kind. Expressions of Christian moralism, she said. And that could not be further from what's actually happening. Yes, the Jewish people were encouraged to be strong and courageous, but they were also told exactly what those words meant and how to live them out. And it has nothing to do with bootstraps. Very often what we understand something to mean, and what those things mean in faith, are very different things. And that is the case here. So thankfully, the book of Joshua does not leave us on our own. We're told exactly what it means to be strong and courageous, and we're told exactly why we ought to do those things. The why is the easy part. Because God is with us. I will give you the land, they are told, and I will be with you. The Lord your God is with you wherever you go. This is the land that God will give you to possess. The Lord your God is providing you a place of rest and will give you this land. The actor in every instance is God. They can be strong because the hard work won't be theirs. Most of the work, in fact, had already been done because God had done it. God had given. God would provide. God was with them. Be strong and courageous is less an encouragement to soldier on and more an encouragement to cast one's future completely into the hands of God. And that takes its own kind of courage. Obedience was the action that needed strength. Obedience needed courage. When it came to the land, the message was clear. It's yours already, and you will find a home there. And before we jump too quickly into evacuating the current tenants, let's listen to some more of Professor Beale's counsel and acknowledge that Rahab, a woman who did not belong to Israel, belonged to God and belonged in the land and became a part of Israel as soon as she was faithful to Israel's God. She was strong and courageous in her obedience. And then not only did she belong, but the Gospels tell us that she found a home and a family and even a place in the genealogy of Jesus. Which leads us to the question of action. We know the why, but what? What does it look like to be strong and courageous? And we find out right in the middle of our passage. The people had been told to be strong and courageous at the beginning, and before the end, they were told the exact same thing. But right in the middle, not only are they told to be strong and courageous, but to be strong and very courageous. Only be strong and very courageous, God says, being careful to act in accordance with all the law that my servant Moses had commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left. The law shall not depart from your mouth. You shall meditate on it day and night. Be careful to act in accordance with all that is written in it. This was the act of courage, and this was Israel's strength. Whatever else was going on around them, they were to look to their Lord and obey him. Dedication and trust in the Lord who gives was their courage and their strength, because their best hope was not in their own strength, but in God's. The same is true for us. Trusting in God is our courage. Resting in him is our strength. God still acts. We are still called to trust and obey. Whatever troubles we face them with the words of God on our lips and the law of God in our hearts. Don't be tempted to turn away from your God out of fear. Be strong and courageous. And for Israel and for us, strength and courage means rest. Whatever else is going on, entrance into an unknown land, forays into an unknown territory, the questions of unknown times and troubles, be strong and courageous. Trust God. Live as though you trust him. Follow his ways. And be courageous, because God will always be with you. Amen.